it just naturally when we're so easily buying into the corruption, and we've been programmed with the corruption over generations. But through our own sowing and reaping, there comes a crushing and a moment when we cry out to God from the depth of our heart and say, hey, God, if you are there. I mean, that's what happened to me. I sort of knew about God as a kid, had visions and all sorts of things, and I sort of daydreamed a lot about what God would be. But it wasn't until I became an adult and came under a severe crushing, like the world fell in on me, all of a sudden my world fell apart. Everything I was trying to hold together, family, work, business, things I was doing, dreams and aspirations, things I was doing suddenly fell apart. My marriage broke up, my children were going crazy, I lost my business, went bankrupt, and everything sort of collapsed on me. And, I said to myself at that time, God, if you are real, show yourself to me. I want to know you. I want to know you. And at that moment, I broke into a vision, and it showed me many, many things of my marvellous self and what I truly am. And I had a glimpse of that, And I think it's in the times of deep, deep oppression and crushing, in war and in all of this injustice that we seem to see in our world of what we call our reality field. I mean, it's not real in God's mind, we know that. And it's something that's in our mind, and we're procreating it. We're carrying on, creating and perpetuating these things that we see through not cleansing and purging our mind. We're sharing a mind of delusion and confusion, and we're strengthening it by talking about it and thinking about it and everything else. But I think there comes a time like the wine press, where we are the grapes of wrath, so to speak. The Bible says, repent. In other words, stop using that mind that you're currently using. Repent. Stop using that mind and use the mind of Christ. Repent. Repent and avoid the wrath of God, so to speak. Our self-imagined idea of God is a God of punishment. And we do everything through sacrifice to appease this God of our own vain imaginations. And so here we are trying to offer something to God as a sacrifice to stop God acting against us with wrath. Well, of course, that's the misperception of God. It's a false idea of God, right? But to repent means to avoid the wrath that we're creating for ourselves. We're creating our own destruction through continually using those minds of, that mind of separation, that mind of fear, that mind of talking with our neighbour about the things in this world that are untrue, and strengthening the illusion. Stop it. Don't do it. And it took a long time for me. I still struggle at times because this is such an entrenchment into our psychology. It's such an entrenchment into the templates of our hologram, into the templates of our temple, into the anatomy and the records in time that have gone on for eons, in separation from God. Our archives are loaded with the false information of separation, and it's a very difficult task to continue to remain focused on our living, breathing, beautiful life of Christ. But we do tend to want that now that we have found it, we've tasted it, we want that beautiful Christ to appear. And so I'm just wondering sometimes, I went through this period in my life of wondering whether there was a purpose in the crushing of the nations. Is there a purpose in being in this oppression? Is there a purpose to, in the one law of God that exists? The law is, as you sow, so shall you reap. That's the law. Basically the law is love one another, and there's no law but God's. We seem to be under the government of the law of dead men, and we adhere to that because that's what we've been subscribing to over many, many generations. But is there something in this one law of God that, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. As you sow, from the corruption of your mind, so shall you reap destruction to your body. Is there something in that? Is it like a law that, that works to really bring us to a place where we'll find God within ourselves and begin to sow from the Spirit, begin to sow from the Spirit of life, and then dissolve the outer laws that have been constraining us, And I'm pretty sure that those things that come against us in this world of our own reality fields are the things that we corporately share in a mind of delusion. And, that's the Hitler idea, that's the war idea, that's the one world government idea, that's the conspiracy theory idea, that this world is true, and that's what is true for us in as much as we experience it. But it's not true in the mind of God. God doesn't know anything about the things that we've vainly imagined. And so my main concern is how can we cleanse our templates? How can we purge ourselves of these ancient records in time that flow rampantly through the gateways of our mind and continue to perpetuate a world that we don't want, And that's really been my dilemma. My dilemma has been, do I just simply ignore all of those things in the world that I see happening around me? Do I just simply let the Spirit of life run me? I know that's a good option. Just let the Spirit of life run my life, and just flow through and open the gateways. But what happens to all those other thoughts that enter in and continue to sow from my unconscious mind? Those thoughts that continue to sow and perpetuate seeds of corruption into the fields of awareness that I'm not totally aware of. How do I get down there into the depth of my being, into the hidden recesses of my mind, my body mind, and how do I purge those things? How do I cleanse those templates? That's always been my feeling, how am I going to do that? And, if I'm responsible for my expression here, if I'm going to be one with my Father, if I'm going to be one with God completely, how am I going to let that mind be in me when it seems like such a struggle at times, And there are many energies in this world that are constantly strengthening the outer realm of illusion. Everyone you talk to in community, they're totally infected, by this mind virus of world programming. How are you going to relate to them and still be relating to God? It's a very delicate balance sometimes, So anyway, that's sort of how I felt. I'm always in that sort of place where, I'm not totally out of the woods, if you know what I mean. I know I'm heading out of the woods, out of the thicket. I'm heading out of it. I come into the forest and I see not so much shade, and there's more cleared areas where there's light in the forest. But I still know I've got some forest to travel through before I get to the clear sunshine. And there are wild creatures in the forest, so to speak, and these are parts of your mind which are constantly there to sort of show you something without seeing the fears and the creatures of your own imagination. You're not going to love those parts of yourself back to light, and so there's constantly a question in my mind. What am I doing here still? I mean, we all want to go home, and that's always been the command. As deep calls unto deep. As the depth of God calls into the depth of God within me. Return unto me, sons of men. Sons of men, return to me, and I will return to you. That's the heart cry and yet there seems to be a lot of time to be cleared in my mind, a lot of time records to be cleared. And are we just simply to ignore those time records and just not focus on them? You know, part of the teaching I've been sort of learning with Kathara is that, you know, rewrite your history or repeat your history. So if you don't rewrite your history, you're going to repeat it. In other words, if you don't look at it or not, unconsciously, those ancient parts of you are still sowing and reaping the corruption into the fields. You see? And so to get down there and have a good look and shine that light into those recesses and to bring the darkness to the altar, you know, to willingly bring those dark spots on the love feast to the altar, to be cleansed and purged and to be transmuted. That's what I think it's all about. And yet sometimes I really struggle. I really struggle. I was down at the shopping centre yesterday, and I'm sitting there having something to eat. And as I'm sitting there, I noticed there's a lot of families all around me, and there was this table just in front of me, and there's a grandmother and her daughter, and then 3 kids, and they're sitting at this one table. And one of the little boys, he was about 2 years old, and I was just sitting there looking at him, and he was crying his heart out, you know, and stamping his feet and wanting to get some attention. And so I just said a little prayer for him, you know, and I said, I give him my peace. My peace I give unto thee, as Jesus said, you know. And fairly quickly he just sort of sat up on the chair again and started, you know, fiddling around on the table. And then at that time I said to myself, you know, God, what am I really doing here? Am I supposed to be writing books, you know, and trying to get something out into the world that way, or am I supposed to be just sitting quietly and just emanating the light of God into the world? What am I here for? You know, am I supposed to be doing something? You know, and as we know from the way of mastery, I need do nothing. You know, I need do nothing. And so I was just sitting there looking at this little boy, and next thing, when I said to God, what am I supposed to be doing here? This feeling came over me, and it just said, your mission is transmission. Your mission is transmission. Make your connection into me. Focus upon that light which is within, and become like a high tower and transmit everything that you have in yourself, transmit into the world. Just like a radio signal would go out or a television signal would go out, he said, just transmit. And so I suddenly saw this little boy. He was staring at me. You know, he couldn't take his eyes off me. The moment I'd sort of assumed the role of a transmission tower and just started to feel that energy rising, as the energy sort of was rising up around me, this little boy spun around, you know, his head spun around, and he was just looking at me. And I knew that he could see something emanating from me, because children are very sensitive to energy and to light, and their mind